Hey, welcome to episode 191 of Fresh Air at 5. In this episode, you're going to hear 2 weeks of listening that looks like barely a week of listening because it's been so full and rich and lots going on, including Halloween and dress-up day. We've had report cards that are due and just the fullness of all of it right now. But without further ado, here's Fresh Air at 5, episode 191. Thanks for your patience. Thanks for sticking around. And thanks for being a fan. Bye.
Hi, I'm Steve Miletto from the Teaching, Learning, Leading K-12 podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter, coming to you every week from Abbotsford, which is about 45 minutes east of Vancouver, British Columbia, on the west coast of Canada. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to get some fresh air by walking about my neighborhood, which is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Stolo people, the Simath First Nation and Mathwee First Nation. I consume podcast content while I walk, then reflect on this content in an unedited video, which I post on my X, formerly known as Twitter, channel every day. This podcast is the collection of the audio taken from those daily selfie videos over the course of a week, Monday to Friday. So let's jump into my listening and learning this past week. Hey, PLN, October 29, 2024. Good morning to you. Hope this finds you well. And as I'm walking, I want to share with you what's been going on. And since I talked to you last, I was in Victoria walking early in the morning near the school that we were going to be operating a Pro-D at. And since then, we had a Pro-D. We had 2,000 teachers attend across British Columbia. In person, 500 or so, and then we had another 1,500 online, and so we provided a professional development experience for them, great speakers, and the work that goes into that was good. And at the end of the day, my team was exhausted, and so shout out to Christina Preston, our president, and how she has motivated us to keep on going. It's good, and I'm glad to be part of the team. They made me vice president this past weekend. So that's another title that I'm proud of, and not an overwhelming one at this point. And I got to remember that I got to take care of myself, and we got to take care of each other in the work that we do. Yes. All right. So that happened. Saturday, got to go to the floating classroom experience, and it was by an Eagle Wing Tours in Victoria, British Columbia, and it's not a whale watching tour, so they have a conservation and education focus to their ecotourism. They take you out on a boat and go look at wildlife and see wildlife that's in the Victoria area. And we were privileged, actually, to see many whales on that day. And so keeping your expectations low and then having them blown completely out of the water is so good. It was great. Killer whales, orcas they're called, humpback whales, sea otter, lots of birds in California, and sea lions and stellar sea lions, harbor seals, bald eagles. Oh, so amazing. Yes, so that's what happened. Then I came home, and now I'm home and back to work, and it's going to be great today. Okay, coming back in a sec. One more thing for October 29, 2024. Remembering your why, how that's gaslighting teachers and leading to teacher burnout. All right, so this is episode 118 of the Resilient Teacher podcast. And Brittany and I stepped into listening to this episode and thought to myself, okay, remembering your why, I believe, is important. But then you brought up a whole bunch of reasons of how that it can be used against teachers to make them feel guilty and gaslight them and, make them feel bad. So the idea of this episode of The Resilient Teacher is to rewrite your why and make sure that you've included yourself in your why. Brittany talks about how during COVID this became popularized because it was, we're kind of in a lull, and admin can go, hey, remember why you started doing this? And you got to be remembering this. And for us here in my school, Brittany, we started talking about our why about 4 or 5 years prior to that. And so it was not during COVID that this came up. But you know what? In my teaching program, we talked about, why are you getting into the teaching program? What is your purpose? And figuring that out early on, I think, is important. And then as it goes, it needs to be fluid. Like, the fluidity of your why is not just this is what I said, and now I got to stick to it whether it kills me or not. That's not good. Not good at all. So Brittany talks about changing the focus of your why to include you. And so if you can include yourself in your why of how and why you do what you do, that can make a huge difference for yourself. Balance as a form of excellence, boundaries as a form of excellence, and so protecting yourself so that you can show up consistently every day for your students, that is so important. What's best for students is, one thing, but how is it also best for you? And so administrators out there, I encourage you to take care of your people, make sure you've got connection, and don't make them feel bad if they aren't performing at 3,000% like we typically have come to expect. All right, that's all I got for now, and we'll talk to you soon, okay? The last thing for October 29, 2024, as I'm wrapping it up here, I listened to Monica Burns and how she shares on the Easy Ed Tech podcast, episode 291, about using AI-generated music in your classrooms and ideas for lessons that how you can incorporate it in your lessons and change things up. Music is an important part of our world, and having artificial intelligence write music is kind of weird and maybe kind of creepy because, how can it know these things? But there's an opportunity for music to be created with AI. And those of us that are not musical, like myself, this is a way to access some unique content that isn't out there, copyrighted or anything like that we can use in our own space. The problem is we get so excited and attached to these things that, we'll be like, oh, that's my song. Well, no, it's not your song. AI wrote the song. You provided the prompt. And do you own it, or does anybody own it? I don't know. Those are questions. But in this episode, Monica brings us some reasons why to consider it. She talks about Music FX. She talks about Suno, and she talks about Loudly as music generating AI tools that you write in a prompt and it provides you with some audio content to come back with. You could use it to remind students of a concept, connect the vocabulary to audio track, like a music track, to help remember some audio, like some vocabulary better. I've got lots of songs in my head that are about that kind of thing, like knowing which months have 30 days and 31 days and etc. like that. So having an audio reminder of these things is important. Historic events, talking about STEM connections that are in there. So yes. All right, take a listen to this episode. Thanks so much, Monica. Have a fabulous day, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye. Hey, PLN, it is Thursday, October 31. Oh, it's spooky day. It's Halloween. And it's on a school day here. So it's one of our days when we have students in our building. So that's really nice because I'm going to get dressed up like our school mascot. We're the AVS Owls. And this face of mine here, I'm going to put a headband on with ears and wings and little feet coming out the bottom. And I'm going to be the AVS Owl mascot. So that's our school mascot. And I'm going to dress up as the AVS Owl. All right, so that's going on. We got newsletter club this morning, and we've got our newsletter built, so all the content has poured in from all of our contributors at school, and we're going to stick it all together and put it into our newsletter. You can go catch up actually on our school website if you're interested. The Abbotsford Virtual School. Go see the work that me and my students are doing with the newsletter. All right, the topic for today on Small Nuggets, Big Change that I caught up on season 4, episode 13 of Seeing to Lead with Dr. Chris Jones and collaborator Craig Shapiro is maximum effort. Maximum effort. When you think about that, what do you think about? Well, when I think about that, I think about, I got to put it in pretty good. Am I doing it? Am I actually doing it? And that is a self-awareness piece of maximum effort. Someone else can tell me that I'm not doing it, but do they know what's going on with me? Do they know how I'm feeling? Do they know the energy that I've got? They might be able to see it, but can they say you're not doing enough? Well, that's an external thing. The internal was what's important. Can I go to bed at night knowing I put in my maximum effort? And most nights I go and say, I did exactly that. I did it. I worked really, really hard today and I put it in. Does that mean I'm working long hours? Not necessarily. Does that mean I'm being efficient? At times, yes. And so take a listen to what Craig and Chris have to say, because it's about working at your maximum ability for a consistent length of time. That's what I got. Consistency over intensity. All right, we'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye. One more thing for October 31, 2024. Season 5, episode 9 of Teach Happier has Suzanne Daly bring us an episode called Get Caught Off Guard. Now, when you think of that, you think about getting startled and not being prepared for something that happens. And that typically is a negative connotation to that. And how do we respond when we get caught off guard? We don't like it sometimes. But how about this? What if we're paying attention in our day? We're not paying attention in our day, and something wonderful happens. Something good and joyous happens. Choosing joy. Choosing to see the good in the moment that it happens. Instead of paying attention to the things that are going to get us in a bad way, think about the things that are going to get us in a good way. Are we aware of the goodness going on? Or are we so stuck in our mundane grinder that we don't even pay attention? Right now, I'm walking. It's 5 degrees Celsius outside, and the wind is blowing slightly. And you know what? That makes me feel alive because I can feel it. I can feel it on my face and on my hands and on my legs. And it reminds me that, you know what? I am alive. And that is something to be thankful for. I am alive and doing well. 54 years old, out walking in the morning and enjoying my life to the max with my family, friends, at work, with my God, and, my community around me. So that is so important. I like the reminders that Suzanne has on her phone of loving God, loving people, and loving what she does. Something like that. And the other is don't miss today. And so the don't miss today is about being present in our day and not missing the things that happen. All right, I encourage you to do the same. Get caught off guard today. Expect to see something that you're not expecting. All right, that's what I'm going to do. Going to school, working with my students. I'm excited about that. Thanks so much. Talk to you. Bye. Hey, PLN, November 5, 2024. It has been a few minutes since I recorded an episode for Fresh Art 5, and it's been a busy season. We've had report cards, post-conference things a week ago, and just teaching and all of the fullness of life at home with my family. We've had a lot of things going on, and but I'm back now, and I got up this morning, and I'm like, I got to get outside. So here I am, part of my discipline that was undisciplined last week, and I'm out for a walk about 3 kilometers this morning, listening to a podcast, doing my learning. This is an important part for me of staying engaged in things that are current by listening to podcast episodes. All right, on episode 252 of the House of Ed Tech, Chris Nesi, the Edu Podfather, brings us chapter 5 of his book that he released in August of 2023 called I Like to Podcast and You Will Too, a House of Ed Tech Guide to Podcasting. And he shares with us, chapter 5, which is about hosting and promoting your podcast. And, I got going with Chris. I'm a part of the Educational Podcast Network. And I got going with Chris back in 2021. It was actually Christmas of 2020 that Chris got on a call with me and did a number of these things that he's got written in his book and shared the content of his book before he wrote the book. So Chris, I thank you for spending your time and experimenting with this guy about getting my podcast recorded and distributed and all that stuff. So on the promotion and distribution part, I'm on Spotify for podcasters. Spotify for podcasters, that's where I host, and I do that for free. I have a logo that I created that I put on there for my graphic, and then that distributes out to Spotify, Apple Podcast, and some other places. You can also listen to it on the Education Podcast Network. All right, Chris, thanks so much. Appreciate you. Thanks all you do. Keep on listening. Keep on going. Okay, bye. One more thing for November 5, 2024. All right, I wasn't done. I've got some more thoughts still about episode 252 of the House of Ed Tech with Chris Nesi as he talks about chapter 5 of his book. I like to podcast, and so will you. It's about the distributing and sharing and engaging your audience. My audienceship is not very large, and if you're listening to this audience, I thank you so very much for you subscribing and taking the time to listen. I've got maybe about 25 or 30, maybe 35 people that listen on a regular basis. And, it's not about numbers. If it was about numbers, I should get into something else than what I'm doing right here. Or, I don't know, maybe it's the promotion. But my way of promoting my podcast is to be on Twix. I like that, Chris. Twix, Twitter, X, and being there, part of the educational Twitter community, has been important for me in my professional development over the years. That's where I am. Could I do more? Yes, I could. Do I have time to do more? At this point, I don't have time to do more, but I could in the future do more. So I write a short blurb for the podcast, and I put it on there. It's on my @FreshArt5 hashtag on Twix, and then I tag myself at Brian Carr on Twix, and then I repost that and get it out to a few people. It's helped with some connections and connectivity. So the way that mine works is that I reach out and listen to the episodes, then I reach out through Twix to the hosts and connect with them there, and that is how I have grown a lot of Fresh Art 5. The evidence of that was when I went to Spring Q last March in California, and people knew about Fresh Art 5. They said they listened or they recognized the name, and it's about being out there on social consistently and being present. All right, thanks all. We'll talk to you soon. Have a happy day. Bye. Hey, PLN, November 7, 2024. Good morning to you. I hope this finds you well. I'm finally kind of back settled. It's been a busy full 2 weeks, as you can see, because this is stretched out over 2 weeks for episode 91 of Fresh Air at 5. All right, this morning I got myself out of bed. It is a crisp morning, probably about 9 degrees. Well, it's not super crisp, but it's about 9 degrees Celsius, a light breeze, and the sky is cloudy. I could see Orion in the sky off to the west, and it's a beautiful morning for a walk. As I walked this morning, I listened to episode 175 of the EdTech Throwdown with my buds Eric Geis and Nick Johnson as they talk with Gabby McGlory, their school, about differentiation and using different ways in your classroom to differentiate instruction and provide opportunity for students at various levels and things like that. It was fascinating to hear, and you should listen to this episode because there is way more there than what I am going to talk about here. Each of them the three of them took a turn and shared a super lesson about differentiation and providing, the content that they wanted to share with their students in a creative way, all the way from station rotation to, a phenomenon at the beginning of a science class and tying that all the way through to a lesson in astronomy and looking at various ways of collecting that information and using even a tool like quizzes, whiteboard for groups to have more of as a formative assessment of what groups are thinking about as opposed to using it for quizzes itself. So knowing your tools is super important, and knowing your content is also really important. So, we have to know our content well, and then look at what tools we have in our back pocket and that we know about, and listening to EdTech Throwdown that we can gain so that we can try some stuff. Thank you so much, Gabby, Eric, and Nick. Appreciate you all. Have a great day. Bye. One more thing for November 7, 2024. Teach Happier with Suzanne Daly, Season 5, Episode 10, has Suzanne bring us an episode called Lessons from the Bills Mafia. Well, I know this about you, Suzanne, that you're a big Buffalo Bills fan, and you enjoy watching them play football and all things Buffalo Bills. I knew that before, but listening to this episode, I really know that now. So what? What about the Buffalo Bills and the Bills Mafia? So we've got a group of fans, a fan base, called the Bills Mafia. I don't know if that includes all the fans or just the super fans like Suzanne, but regardless, she talks about how the Bills Mafia gets behind a cause together and can raise money crazy fast for a certain thing, like a charity, for example. And I'm just going to pause right here for a second. All right, I just ran into a friend of mine, Jen. I see her in the morning as I'm out walking sometimes. She's an EA in the district here. All right, I was talking about the Bills Mafia and about what they do as intentional acts of kindness. And so that's the word that Suzanne was using, the words, intentional acts of kindness. How, say someone gets injured and a way to show support for that quarterback is to find out what their favorite charity is and raise money to show that, hey, we support you and we're going to support your charity as you are recovering so that you can see that we are in the business of doing good like you. How do you do intentional acts of kindness around you every day? We call them random acts of kindness, but you know what? If it just happens upon us and then we go, oh, I'm going to do that. Is it random? Well, I guess it is kind of random that the situation happened, but we have to be intentional in our kindness and our actions to be able to make a thing come to fruition. That is a random act of kindness. All right, so thanks, Suzanne. I appreciate the lessons from the Bills Mafia, and you should take a listen. Subscribe to Teach Happier because it'll inspire you too. Thanks. Have a good day. Bye. The last thing for November 7, 2024, I listened to Shanna Martin and Fuzz Martin as they bring us an episode called Inclusive Evaluating Reading Accessibility on Tech Tools for Teachers, episode 196. And so in this episode, they talk about a tool that's called Inclusive, and it's by CAST, C-A-S-T, which is a UDL framework that is provided by this organization. And it's free, and we can use it to help level and provide differentiated reading text of the same thing to students. There is vocabulary in there. There is ways of students changing the information that's provided, maybe on the article that they're reading at the actual time by adjusting their vocabulary words or things like that. I have to go play with this. Shanna, it's exciting, super exciting that you brought this to us. And I learned from you in this podcast that the Comic Sans font, which we scoff at because, Comic Sans, that's so like 1990s. But in fact, the Comic Sans A, letter A, is good for young readers because it's written, it's the A of the font is similar to the way we handwrite the A, with the circle and the little stick that comes down the side, instead of the fancy font of like with the circle and the stick that goes up and down, which is the way we don't write it. So being able to connect the visual on the screen with how we actually handwrite is important. So that's why Comic Sans is important. Learn that. Okay, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about Clusive as this reading tool. Go check it out and listen to Shanna's episode here because she talks about it better than I do. I'm bringing you this so that you go and listen. And Shanna, thank you so much for being part of my PETA. I didn't cross paths with you at our event a couple weeks ago because I was in person, you were online, and our paths actually didn't cross. But I appreciate you participating with us, BC Educators. All right, have a fabulous day. We'll talk to you soon. I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's like a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find some other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific episode podcast titles and episode numbers in the show notes, which are only a click or swipe away for your learning convenience. I've also started to put together a Spotify playlist of each of the episodes so that you can also take a listen to those specifically, and the link to that playlist is in the show notes. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoy this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. You can also follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Brian Carr, BRYONCAR, or at Fresh Air at 5. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can be found on the Educational Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day. Get some fresh air before the day is out and take care of yourself because you are worth it.